Good evening, I'm Anna Kalczyńska and you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. Poland is extending controls along its northeastern and western borders, at least until October. Warsaw initially reintroduced the controls in response to concerns over irregular migration and security. More on the Polish assessment of its security situation in just a moment. But first, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Ukraine says it uncovered a major drone procurement corruption scheme. Polish officials engaged in a diplomatic exchange over Israel's actions in Gaza. And Poland's unstoppable national team wins the Volleyball Nations League. Poland has extended its temporary border controls with Germany and Lithuania until October 4th, and possibly even longer. The measure was originally introduced for a period of 1 month, but Interior Minister Marcin Kierwiński says concerns over illegal migration persist. Meanwhile, Estonia is installing a new security gate at a key pedestrian border crossing with Russia to reinforce its eastern frontier amid growing concerns over border security and potential migration pressure. Sonia Gata-Biszczan reports.
Temporary checks on Poland's borders with Germany and Lithuania will continue until October 4th. Interior Minister Marcin Kierwiński said that the 98% tightness of the country's eastern border is causing Belarusian and Russian security services and illegal migration to shift to other routes.
Today, the fundamental issue, not only for us, but for our partners in the European Union, is to close, if I may use such a word, the route that moved to Lithuania and Latvia. Hence these decisions, the decisions that Prime Minister Donald Tusk made and Minister Tomasz Siemoniak also made about the reintroduction of temporary controls on the German border and on the Lithuanian border.
The interim border checks entered into force on July 7th, initially for 30 days, with Polish authorities citing security considerations as the reason for the move.
We've been struggling with organized illegal migration. And when I say organized, I mean it's been orchestrated, let's call it what it is, by the Lukashenko regime with support from the Putin administration. And the consequences have been very serious.
At the Sunday presser, Polish officials noted that they're in contact regarding the extension of measures with the relevant partners, including the European Commission, also with the purpose of obtaining additional funds.
For the border, first of all, the Polish-Belarusian border, but also 2 other borders between Latvia and Belarus and Lithuania and Belarus. This will require the efforts of the entire EU, because the nature of this migration route is different from routes in other countries. Here, we are dealing with a hybrid threat, the instrumentalization of migration and operations by countries that are hostile to EU member states.
In line with the requirements set forth by the Schengen Code, Poland also notified the European Commission of the extension of temporary border checks on the grounds of public order and public safety. Since the measure was first introduced on the borders with Germany and Lithuania between July 7th and August 2nd, Polish authorities checked over 493,000 people.
During that period, throughout the nearly 4 weeks temporarily reinstated of border inspections, we denied entry to Poland to 185 foreign nationals, and the basis for the refusal was the absence of documents required to cross the border.
Security considerations are also top of mind in Estonia, as the country is installing gates and barriers at the Narva Bridge, a key pedestrian border crossing with Russia.
The barriers help prevent vehicles from forcefully driving through the border checkpoint. About 5 years ago, we had a case where a vehicle from the Russian side drove through the existing barriers.
The security gate is also intended to help manage a potential migration surge on the bridge, allowing for complete closure of the checkpoint if needed. The entirety of the work is expected to be completed by the end of September. For TVP World, I'm Sonia Gata-Biszczan.
Ukraine's anti-corruption bodies say they've uncovered a major graft scheme that procured military drones and signal jamming systems at inflated prices. Our correspondent Oz Katerji is in Kiev and joins us live. Good evening, Oz. So what can you tell us about this latest development?
Well, those 2 anti-corruption bodies, the stripping of the independence of, which caused those protests in Kyiv last week, they are back in the news. Today, they've announced On Saturday, they announced a probe into a graft scheme uncovered, which involved a member of the parliament, the Verkhovna Rada, but also current and former regional officials and members of the National Guard. Now, the alleged scheme was involving the procurement of drones and electronic warfare. Those are jamming technologies, use anti-drone jamming technologies. So this is quite something that has rocked the Ukrainian establishment, because it's one within now the MP involved, who has been named in the Ukrainian press as Alexei Kuznetsov, who is a member of President Zelensky's own Servant of the People party. Now, it's understood that his membership of that parliamentary bloc has been suspended while investigations continue. Zelensky himself released a statement on Saturday evening regarding the scheme that has been uncovered by the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine and the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office. Let's take a listen to that statement by Zelensky.
Today, I also met with the heads of NABU and SAPO, Semen Krivonos and Oleksandr Klimenko. Anti-corruption agencies have exposed a lawmaker of the Ukrainian parliament, along with heads of district and city administrations and National Guard service members, for bribery. Unfortunately, these corruption schemes involve the procurement of electronic warfare systems and first-person view drones. This is absolutely immoral. There must be full and fair accountability for this.
Now, in the fallout of this, Ukraine's National Guard has announced reforms. The Prime Minister, Yulia Svyrydenko, has also convened the Cabinet of Ministers for an extraordinary meeting regarding this. No matter what, corruption is going to keep rumbling on in the headlines here in Ukraine. The fight against it is seen as crucial for Ukraine's future European integration. So stories like this, while they will rock the establishment here, the Ukrainian government will at least be satisfied that the work of these anti-corruption bodies seems to be going forward now unimpeded. Back to you in the studio.
Oskar from Kiev. Thank you so much, Os. The social media platform X has once again become the site of a diplomatic clash, with Tom Rose, the U.S. ambassador nominee to Poland, admonishing the country's foreign minister Radosław Sikorski over his recent comment on the situation in Gaza. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk joined in on Sunday, emphasizing that Warsaw has been a major supporter of Israel's fight against Islamist terrorism, but distancing Poland from the ongoing operations of the current Israeli government.
Prime Minister Donald Tusk recalled the joint experiences of the Polish and Jewish nations under Nazi occupation to draw a line between supporting the State of Israel and the actions of its current leadership.
Poland was, is and will be on the side of Israel in its fight against Islamist terrorism, but never on the side of politicians whose actions lead to hunger and the death of mothers and children. This should be obvious for nations that together endured the hell of World War II.
Business today been hearing.
This comes after the U.S. ambassador nominee to Poland, Thomas Rose, took to the social media platform X to respond to Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski, who said on Saturday that, quote, "the starving children of Gaza have no idea what Hamas is," and called on Israel to respect international law.
As you well know, history offers no precedent where a terrorist group wages war for the explicit annihilation of a sovereign state, embeds itself among civilians, and then relies on that very state to supply it with food, water, and fuel. And yet, that is exactly what Israel has done, often under duress, often at great cost and risk to its own soldiers, and almost always without reciprocity.
President Donald Trump nominated Mr. Rose to be the next ambassador to Poland back in February. He is currently awaiting confirmation by the U.S. Senate, required before he can begin his mission to Warsaw. The Polish leadership calling on Israel to obey international law should not come as a surprise. The Polish embassy in Jordan, as well as multiple Polish charities, have been facilitating deliveries of aid into the Gaza Strip. Warsaw recognized the State of Palestine in 1988, and since then it has firmly stood for the two-state solution, maintaining diplomatic relations with both Israel and Palestine. This could prove problematic for future Ambassador Thomas Rose, who describes himself on social media as a not-so-secret agent of MAGA Judeo-Christian conspiracy, and often shares posts claiming that there is no famine in Gaza, especially not one caused by Benjamin Netanyahu's government. Like this video posted by the Israeli Foreign Ministry.
It's cystic fibrosis, a genetic illness. Israel already facilitated this boy's medical transfer to Italy back on June 12th.
But the images coming out of Gaza paint a very different picture, one of desperate Palestinians looking at their starving children and having nowhere to get food, as Israeli forces have been targeting both charity trucks and aid distribution centers. For TVP World, Natalia Komarov.
Amid the constant stream of bad news from around the world, the Vatican is sending a message of hope to Catholic youth. At a gathering that's been dubbed the Catholic Woodstock, Pope Leo on Sunday addressed a crowd of over 1 million young faithful from across the globe, reassuring them that, in his words, a different world is possible. Natalia Komarov has this report.
The Jubilee of Youth wraps up in Rome. Despite Italy's scorching heat, over 1 million faithful from 146 countries participated in the event. On Sunday morning, cheering crowds greeted Pope Leo XIV as he arrived at the campus of Tor Vergata University to preside over Holy Mass. In his sermon, delivered in Italian, Spanish and English, the Pope quoted one of his predecessors, John Paul II, calling on the youth to build a more humane and brotherly world of the future.
My young brothers and sisters, you are the sign that a different world is possible. A world of fraternity and friendship, where conflicts are not resolved with weapons, but with dialogue.
According to the organizers, this year's Jubilee of Youth was attended by visitors from countries like Syria, South Sudan and Ukraine. Pope Leo made a point of expressing solidarity with the many young people worldwide who, quote, suffer the most serious evils which are caused by other human beings.
We are with the young people of Gaza. We are with the young people of Ukraine. With those of every land bloodied by war.
Young pilgrims were overwhelmed with emotion upon seeing the Pope.
I have to say, I think he's stirring something in the souls of us young people.
Seeing him yesterday, being 5 meters from him, he really gives out energy that is a hope for us all, I think.
It's just amazing to see just how big the world church is and how many people are here just believing in God and actually being on fire to see the Pope.
Now, 1 million pilgrims will bring the Pope's message of hope to their homelands. For TVP World, Natalia Komarov.
They need extensive knowledge of mountains, experience in rough terrain and excellent physical fitness. Getting a mountains guide license in Poland is not easy. Authorities in the Tatra National Park say some self-styled guides have been trying to cut corners, and hikers are having a hard time telling them apart from licensed ones. Agata Dura takes on a safe trip into one of Poland's most popular mountain ranges.
Illegal guiding, or as it's literally called in Polish, black guiding. It's a problem that's becoming increasingly popular in Poland's Tatra Mountains. The term refers to people who organize commercial trips without the proper qualifications.
I don't support it. I'm against it. To guide people in the mountains, you need to have the proper experience, not just superficial knowledge.
unregistered guides advertise what they call partner trips. In reality, these hikes are nothing more than paid services, which, under Polish law, should only be provided by licensed guides.
A licensed guide has knowledge about safety, the nature of the Tatra Mountains, the applicable regulations, and can assess situations in which it is necessary to turn back. They will not expose their clients to risk.
In Poland, licensed guides must have a range of qualifications, including extensive specialized knowledge of specific mountain ranges, excellent physical condition, and good climbing skills in technically challenging terrain. They are also required to have first aid skills.
If I were to go on a guided hike, I'd definitely choose a licensed guide. They're more trustworthy and I'd feel safer.
Qualifications. They need to have the proper qualifications. Without them, you simply don't go into the mountains.
The Tatra National Park has warned tourists of the illegal practice, and Poland's Ministry of Sports and Tourism said it would conduct a review of the tour guide market.
I think the authorities need to clamp down on fraud, whatever form it takes. If guides are required to have a license or permit, then that's a rule they need to obey. The point of these regulations is to make sure people are safe and that your guide knows what to do in case of an emergency.
Licensed guides warn that their illegal competitors have been known to abandon their clients at their destinations, leading hikers to mountaintops and then leaving them to fend for themselves. For TVP World, I'm Agata Dura.
Poland are the new men's volleyball Nations League champions after an emphatic victory in today's final against world champions Italy. The unstoppable Polish team won 3 knockout matches in a row without losing a single set. It was the second Nations League gold for Poland after 2023 and its 6th consecutive podium. Despite missing key player Tomasz Fornal due to injury, Poland, led by coach Nikola Grbic, fielded a well-balanced team featuring Kamil Semeniuk and Wilfredo Leon as key attackers. Poland had the edge from the very first set, which ended 25-22. Afterwards, Italy struggled with errors, including confusion in rotations, which Poland exploited ruthlessly. The second set saw Poland maintain control, winning 25-19. By the third set, Poland surged ahead, achieving a commanding 25-14 finish. Brazil secured third place by defeating Slovenia 3-1. And Poland now sets its sights on the upcoming World Championships in the Philippines this September. And now we come to the first and main subject, disgusting. That's the exact word used by US President Donald Trump to describe Russia's recent strikes on Kiev. As the world runs out of words of condemnation and diplomatic efforts seem to be failing, will geopolitics swing the outcome of the conflict? How will Donald Trump's plans to impose sanctions on Moscow and its trading partners impact Russian President Vladimir Putin's decision-making? Here with me to share his insight is Mark Toth, National Security and Foreign Policy Political Analyst. Good evening, sir, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Anna, thank you. Thank you for having me back on.
New sanctions would be implemented within about 8 days. That's according to Donald Trump, but Trump himself voiced some doubts about their effectiveness. Are sanctions too little too late now? What's your perception on the situation? Is a longer war in Ukraine becoming a new reality?
I think at this point, there's 2 ways to look at it. One, they're helpful in the sense of any dollars, any rubles that are denied to Putin is a good thing. It stops him from using those to fund his war in Ukraine. That said, it's too late. In terms of stopping what Putin is doing in Ukraine, this continual targeting of Ukrainian civilian targets, this basic 900-mile front line that's basically become a war of attrition that he's continuing. Is not going to stop unless Ukraine gets added military aid that enables it to go on the offensive against Putin. So sanctions can help. Certainly the secondary sanctions in particular can help, especially because those interdict trade that happens between nations. The U.S. can disrupt that on the global markets in terms of transactions. So from that standpoint, countries like India that try to purchase Russian oil, that can have good effects. But I don't think at the end of the day it's going to have the intended effect that that Trump wants, which is causing Putin to end this war. So they're helpful, but they're not decisive.
Believe it or not, and that's quoting Donald Trump, his special envoy, Michael Witkoff, has been dispatched to Moscow again. So far, his visits to Moscow and talks with Vladimir Putin have brought no tangible results. So in your view, is Witkoff to blame, or is Putin simply deceiving the American president?
Yeah, I think Witkoff, when he goes, hears what he wants to hear as opposed to hears what Putin is basically saying. And I don't think you can look at what Putin is saying in these meetings. You've got to look at Putin's actions on the battlefield. So, for instance, every time one of these meetings happens between Witkoff, every time one of these phone calls happens between Donald Trump and Putin himself, as noted by Melania Trump, the First Lady of the United States, Putin then goes back out after saying, yep, no, we can make progress, we can pursue peace, etc. He goes back out and he continues his bombing campaign against Ukrainian civilians and the like. He's not curtailing anything in the war, not giving the U.S. any sign, any indication that he truly means peace, that he truly wants to pursue any kind of negotiation that's substantive. So I think in this case, okay, Witkoff's back. But I think he's going to hear more of the same. It'll be some kind of vague notion that, well, sure, we can resume some type of negotiations. We'll set them for some point in the future, and we'll sit down and we'll talk about this again. But it's just kabuki theater. It's just redux of what we've already heard, which is basically Russia saying, well, think about peace. Meanwhile, we're going to continue our war.
Right, so pundits differ in their opinions, obviously. I myself was convinced by an Applebaum recently, who says that Putin has to be convinced that the war cannot be won. The war is hopeless, basically. So do you share this view? What will it take to force Putin to stand down?
I do, and you're wise to take that view, because we're at a point where the negotiation process has been going on since Trump took office. It's led to nowhere. We're no closer to any kind of deal, any substantive deal that gets us closer to peace. And the just enough approach, one that began with Biden in his administration of giving Ukraine just enough to defend itself, but not enough to stop the war against it, hasn't worked. And so until Putin comes to believe, as Applebaum said, and as you noted, and as your own conviction is, until he comes to believe that he cannot win this war, nothing is substantially going to change. But that's going to take a change in Washington's thinking. It can't just be defensive weapons, which we've seen to date. Even this latest round was highly defensive, the 17 Patriot missile batteries that are earmarked for Ukraine. Those are great. Those can protect civilian infrastructure. It can be pushed up into the forward parts of the battlefield and helping the Ukrainian forces as well. But much more is needed. JASSMs, for instance, these are surface-to-air missiles that are fired from F-16s that can go 200 miles, can reach Moscow and interdict things there. They can take out the Kerch Bridge. The Taurus missile, for instance, from Germany is needed. A rethinking is much needed along the lines of NATO, because this isn't going to work unless Ukraine is given these offensive type capabilities so that they can go after the Russian archers, meaning the people that fire these weapons, and not continually just defend against them. Because all this has done is created this war of attrition that we've seen that's slowly starting to give way, and Ukraine keeps losing territory, albeit small parts at a time, a kilometer a day. It's not significant. It's not going to cause them to lose the war, but it just tells you that it's not going to let them win it either and put an end to the dying.
So there's much more to be used still. But coming back to Washington's thinking, as you mentioned, Donald Trump's apparently getting frustrated with the limited success of his diplomatic efforts. He also distanced himself from the conflict by calling it Biden's war. So what motivation does the U.S. president have at this point to end the Russian aggression?
Yeah, I think at this point, his worldview is getting pushed back in terms of Putin. He thought that he could come in, that he could sideline this war and end it. And then basically there are people in his administration, people like Elbridge Colby, even the vice president, J.D. Vance, that believes that somehow you could peel Russia off and then use them in some kind of fight to contain, to deter China in the Indo-Pacific. That just simply hasn't worked. And I think that's why you've seen such a long timeline here where Trump has tried to make that happen. But he's starting to recognize that Putin is not going to be peeled off, that he's going to continue this partnership with Xi Jinping, the president of China, and that no amount of peace efforts on the part of the U.S. are going to work. So I think for him, it really is, it's coming to face reality. Initially, he had given Putin 50 days, which would have taken us to after Labor Day, a major holiday here in the U.S., but now he's shortened that to the 10 to 12 days. And so we're looking at somewhere around August 8th, if you will, where these sanctions could be put in place. I do think you're going to see Trump follow through on this. He needs to. He's given his word that he has. Putin will try to get out of it. He'll certainly try to negotiate, call for talks, with Witkoff being there and Moscow and the like. But unless Trump starts backing up his words, Putin isn't going to change anything, and this war will continue.
Well, that's a view shared also by retired General David Petraeus, who commanded U.S. and coalition forces in Iraq and Afghanistan. According to him, a ceasefire in Ukraine is only likely when Western aid enables Kiev to shift the battlefield dynamic. So apart from the help of United States, what can Europe do?
Right, and I'd quickly really reiterate your words there about General Petraeus. My writing colleague, Colonel John Sweet, had served under him multiple times, and definitely General Petraeus is right. This is the only way forward that the West has in terms of stopping this war. So, I think that's important. And I apologize, I lost your question there.
Yes, right. I was asking you about Europe's efforts, because you spoke at large about American weapons to be used. How about Europe? What can we do here?
Yeah, and my apologies. I was focused on General Petraeus there. Europe needs to do a lot more. I think the biggest threat is to Europe in terms of what Putin would do next in the Baltic states, to Poland, et cetera. And I think one of the things that they can do is what Zelensky just called for, starting to interdict this fleet, that 70% of the oil that Russia trades through its shadow fleet goes through the Baltic Sea. That's something tangible that Europe can be doing right away to put a stop to that. And that would put a huge negative in terms of cash flow that Putin is getting to fund his war, would stop these illegal oil sales from happening. Europe can also push forward things like the Taurus missile that I mentioned a few minutes ago. That could take out the Kerch Bridge, which would be a very tactical, useful operation in terms of isolating Crimea and making it difficult for Putin to resupply his troops that today are still striking Kherson in southern Ukraine and creating threats there. Russian forces are going after a key bridge there. Why not enable them through the Taurus missile, et cetera, from Europe to do that elsewhere? So I think the same messaging that I have for the Trump administration to do more militarily in terms of offensive weapon capabilities is the same thing for Europe. And I think if they can get behind that, if they can realize that Ukraine is willing to fight this fight, they are fighting this fight, and they can give them the weapons to win this fight, that'll stop European nations from having to send your own young sons and daughters into battle at some future point with Putin.
And lastly, there's, of course, one last element of this puzzle. Convinced that he's winning the war, Vladimir Putin's response to negotiation efforts has been reserved, to say the least. But is he right? What's the situation on the ground, and how resilient is actually the Russian economy?
Yeah, I think anytime you have a dictator, to take your second part first, in charge of an economy, he's turned it into a war economy. So he has staying power there. Germany, up until that third quarter during the Second World War, was able to keep its military production at all-time high. And Putin is going to be able to do that because he's got Xi supporting him behind the scenes. We've seen a lot of dual-use technology from China already on the battlefield. And now we're just seeing outright Chinese production of things that are showing up on the battlefield. Ukraine's done a good job of identifying that. So from an economy standpoint, I know it's dire, it's implosive, it's a bubble that could easily burst once the war is over. But I think as long as this war is continuing, and as long as Xi Jinping is willing to back them with the money and supplies, it's not going to implode anytime soon. In terms of the battlefield itself, look, it's dynamic now. It's not a static battlefield, but it's happening at a foot's pace. I wrote about this the other day in Washington, D.C., where these aren't sweeping maneuvers yet of large, 50-mile gains in a day, but it's basically a foot soldier. And the tactics are changing. Instead of Russia attacking the Donetsk fortress, if you will, they're going around it with 8 different supporting salients, where they're using squads with just motorcycle guys, 3-5 to a group, probing weaknesses in the Ukrainian front lines, and then massing there to try to do gains. But again, we're talking a square kilometer a day, nothing significant. But incrementally, they're starting to take territory. And just to put a bow on that, if this war in Trump's mind is all about the rare earth minerals and this deal that he struck, every square kilometer that they take, including, for instance, that 100-acre lithium mine that Russia took several weeks back, is taking rare earth minerals off the table and putting them in Putin's pocket as opposed to the West. And so that needs to be reversed.
Thank you so much. Mark Toth, U.S. National Security and Foreign Policy Analyst, has been our guest tonight. Thank you so much once again.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for staying here with us at World News Tonight. Please stay tuned to TVP World for more news and continuous coverage of commentaries.